You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. The conflict known as Creek militancy arose because of the United States encroaching on Creek lands and their way of life. However, this conflict isn't only known by that name. It's also referred to as the Creek Civil War, a term that emphasizes the deep divisions within the Creek tribe itself. These divisions stemmed from differences in culture, politics, economics, and geographic locations. At the time this war erupted, the geography of Creek territory was a significant factor. The Upper Creeks controlled regions along the Coosa, Tallapoosa, and Alabama rivers, which lead to Mobile, while the Lower Creeks were in charge of the area around the Chattahoochee River, flowing into Apalachicola Bay. A notable distinction is that the Lower Creeks had closer trading relationships with the United States and had assimilated more American cultural practices, unlike the Upper Creeks. The East and West Florida provinces, once managed by both Spanish and British companies like Panton, Leslie & Company, were vital sources of European goods for the Creek regions. Key ports such as Pensacola and Mobile, located in Spanish Florida, were essential for controlling the trade exiting the rivers of the U.S. Mississippi Territory. The complex territorial disputes involving France, Spain, Britain, and the United States along the Gulf Coast had long allowed the Creeks significant control over the southwestern parts of the U.S. territory. However, the landscape of these conflicts changed dramatically due to events like the Napoleonic Wars, the West Florida Rebellion, and the War of 1812. Making the Creeks' trade and political alliances more fragile than ever before. Through various treaties, the Treaty of New York in 1790, the Treaty of Coleraine in 1796, the Treaty of Fort Wilkinson in 1802, and the Treaty of Washington in 1805, the Creek relinquished lands east of the Ocmulgee River in Georgia. In 1804, the United States claimed Mobile via the Mobile Act, and the 1805 treaty with the Creek facilitated constructing the Federal Road, connecting Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, partially running through Creek lands. Post-American Revolution, the U.S. aimed to uphold the Indian line set by the Royal Proclamation of 1763, which marked a boundary to control colonial expansion and manage trade with Native American lands. However, this boundary was frequently ignored by traders and settlers, leading to unauthorized settlements on Indian lands, which the U.S. used as a pretext for territorial expansion. This westward expansion into Creek territories and parts of Spanish Florida, alongside the controversy of the Louisiana Purchase, prompted the British and Spanish to reinforce alliances with the Creek. Following the 1810 occupation of Baton Rouge during the West Florida Rebellion, the U.S. moved to occupy Mobile, resulting in a joint occupation by American and Spanish forces until the U.S. gained full control in February 1813 under General James Wilkinson's directive. Between 1811 and 1815, the Patriot Army seized parts of East Florida. After the surrender of Fort Charlotte in April, Spanish focus shifted towards defending Pensacola against the U.S. In support of the Creeks and defense of their land, the Spanish decided to back an attack against the United States, despite their weakened position in the Floridas and a critical shortage of supplies, even for their own troops. The division among the Creek people into progressive and traditionalist groups traces its origins back to the 1700s but escalated significantly after 1811. This division was largely due to the Red Sticks movement, a reaction to the challenges Creek society faced as a result of embracing Western trade goods and customs. Since the 1500s, the Creeks had established lucrative trade agreements with European powers. However, a dramatic decline in deerskin prices between 1783 and 1793 made it harder for people to clear their debts. At the same time, ongoing assimilation made dependency on American products grow. The Red Sticks particularly opposed the civilization initiatives led by Benjamin Hawkins, a U.S. Indian agent who had better relationships with the lower Creek towns. Some progressive Creeks began adopting American agricultural techniques as their traditional hunting grounds dwindled, and as more Anglo settlers integrated into Creek communities and families. In what's now Georgia, leaders of the lower Creek towns included Birdtail King of Cuseta, Little Prince of Broken Arrow, and William McIntosh of Coweta. Many notable Creek chiefs before the Creek War, including William McGillivray and William McIntosh, were of mixed ancestry and found themselves on opposing sides during the Creek Civil War. Before the Creek War and the War of 1812, U.S. political figures largely considered removal the sole alternative to the Western assimilation of indigenous peoples. Meanwhile, the Creeks were incorporating Western trade items and concepts into their culture without any intention of giving up their lands. The push for Americanization was more intense among the lower Creeks in western Georgia than in the upper Creek communities. This pressure from the U.S. government and Benjamin Hawkins contrasted with the more organic cultural fusion that had occurred through extended coexistence and cultural exchange, starting with white traders. Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader, came to the area promoting unity against American encroachment, having previously rallied tribes in the Northwest to resist U.S. settlers following the War for Independence. In 1811, he and his brother Tenskwatawa attended the annual Creek Council at Tukabachi, where Tecumseh's speech advocating resistance was warmly received by many Creeks and Seminoles, particularly among traditional elders and young men. Despite American officials dismissing Tecumseh as not a threat, the mobilization for Tecumseh's cause gained momentum with the sighting of the Great Comet of 1811 and the new Madrid earthquakes of 1811 to 1812, interpreted as signs of Tecumseh's divine support. Leaders such as Peter McQueen of Tbilisi, Josiah Francis of Autauga, and others emerged as spiritual guides, echoing the sentiment against U.S. policies, especially in foreign relations. This growing militant group became known as Red Sticks, a term in Creek culture where red signifies war, contrasting with white, which stands for peace. Creeks who opposed the war found themselves in danger, facing attacks in their sleep or even being burned alive by the prophets and their followers. These warriors didn't stop there. They went on to destroy the property of those they considered enemies, including burning down plantations and killing livestock. The conflict escalated with a significant attack by the Red Stick faction on the Upper Creek town of Tukabachi, a major council location, on July 22, 1813. In Georgia, a group of Creeks, referred to as friendly, because of their opposition to the Red Sticks and led by William McIntosh, Big Warrior and Little Prince, launched an attack on 150 Uchi warriors. These Uchi were en route to join the Red Sticks in what's now Mississippi in early October 1813. This group didn't just stop with the attack. They went on to destroy several Red Stick towns before pulling back to Coweta. Although there were some attacks on white settlers in 1812 and early 1813, Benjamin Hawkins, an Indian agent, didn't see the unrest within the Creek Nation, or the increase in war dances, as a significant threat. However, in February 1813, a shift occurred when a group of Red Sticks, led by Little Warrior, killed 2 settler families along the Ohio River upon their return from Detroit. Hawkins demanded the Creek hand over Little Warrior and his group, a demand that reflected the standard way of handling such incidents until then. The conflict between the Red Sticks and the United States took a direct turn on July 27, 1813, when a territorial militia intercepted a Red Stick group returning from Spanish Florida with supplies including gunpowder, blankets, and food from the Spanish governor in Pensacola. After the Red Sticks fled and the soldiers began looting, the Creek warriors counterattacked and won. This encounter, known as the Battle of Burnt Corn, marked the Creek Civil War's expansion to involve American forces directly. One of the most brutal attacks was led by Chiefs Peter McQueen and William Weatherford on Fort Mims, north of Mobile, on August 30, 1813. Their target was the Mixed Blood Creek, taking refuge in the fort, part of the Tensaw settlement. The warriors stormed the fort and killed between 400 to 500 people, including women, children, and many white settlers. This horrific event, now known as the Fort Mims Massacre, became a pivotal moment that galvanized American militia into action. After the Red Sticks attacked multiple forts, including Fort Sinquefield, fear and chaos spread among settlers on the southwestern frontier. They urgently called for help from the United States government. However, the United States military was already engaged in combat with the British and northern woodland tribes, including forces led by the Shawnee chief Tecumseh in the northwest. As a result, the affected states activated their militias to confront the looming threat. Following the clash at Burnt Corn, John Armstrong, the United States Secretary of War, informed General Thomas Pinckney, the head of the 6th Military District, that the United States was ready to act against the Creek Confederacy. Armstrong also indicated that if Spain was found backing the Creeks, a military move on Pensacola would follow. Brigadier General Ferdinand Claiborne, leading a militia in the Mississippi Territory, worried about the vulnerability of his area, which was on the edge of Creek lands. He argued for striking first, However, Major General Thomas Florney, overseeing the 7th Military District, rejected these calls, opting for a defensive strategy instead. Settlers, feeling uneasy and threatened, took shelter in fortified buildings known as blockhouses. In Tennessee, the state legislature empowered Governor Willie Blount to organize 5,000 militia troops for a 3-month duty period. Responding, Blount mobilized 2,500 men from West Tennessee under Colonel Andrew Jackson to counter a potential invasion and support the Mississippi Territory, along with another 2,500 from East Tennessee, led by Major General John Alexander Koch. Both groups, however, were not ready to deploy until early October. In parallel efforts, United States Indian Agent Hawkins enlisted the cooperation of the friendly Lower Creek, led by Major William McIntosh, a Creek chief, to assist the Georgia and Tennessee militias against the Red Sticks. At the urging of the chief federal agent Return J. Meigs, nicknamed White Eagle by the Native Americans due to his hair color, the Cherokee Nation agreed to ally with the Americans against the Red Sticks. Commanded by Chief Major Ridge, 200 Cherokees joined forces with Colonel Andrew Jackson's Tennessee militia. At their strongest, the Red Sticks mustered up to 4,000 warriors, equipped with roughly 1,000 muskets. They had little experience in large-scale battles, even against other Native American groups. General Koch noted that archery played a significant role in their warfare tactics, as each warrior carried a bow and arrows for use after discharging their initial musket shot. Notably, the spiritual center of the Red Stick Confederacy was the Holy Ground, situated at the confluence of the Alabama and Coosa rivers, quite a distance from any American supply bases. The most straightforward attack path from Georgia cut through a line of frontier forts and followed a well-trodden road leading to the Upper Creek towns near the Holy Ground. Another potential route started north from Mobile, tracing the Alabama River. Jackson's approach, however, was from the south, moving up from Tennessee through challenging mountainous and unmarked territories. In August, Georgia prepared for conflict with the Creeks by rallying the volunteer army and state militia. The news of an attack on Fort Mims reached Georgia on September 16th, justifying a military response. Benjamin Hawkins informed Brigadier General John Floyd on September 30th that the Creeks had acquired 25 rifles in Pensacola, increasing tensions. Georgia's focus was on defending its border with Creek territories along the Ocmulgee River. Given the threat near Jasper and Jones counties from hostile Creek factions, Major General David Adams led a Georgia Volunteer Militia Regiment. Meanwhile, John Floyd, commanding a 2,362-strong Maine, Georgia force since September 1812, received help from the Cherokee, some Creek allies, and additional militia. Floyd's mission was to march to where the Coosa and Tallapoosa rivers meet, linking up with the Army of Tennessee. A delay in securing supplies gave Floyd extra time to prepare his troops at Fort Hawkins. On November 24th, he crossed the Chattahoochee River, setting up Fort Mitchell, and gathered about 300 to 400 allied Creek warriors. With these forces and 950 of his soldiers, Floyd advanced towards the significant Creek town of Autossi on the Tallapoosa River, destroying it on November 29th, with the loss of 11 of his men and an estimated 200 Creek fatalities. Floyd's second attempt to push west started with over 1,500 men, fortifying their path with constructions like Fort Bainbridge and Fort Hull. Near the remains of Autossi, on January 26th, they faced a large force of at least 1,300 Creek warriors assembled by leaders including William Weatherford and Highhead Jim in an effort to halt Floyd's progress. Despite a fierce attack on January 29th, Floyd's forces managed to repel the Creek, suffering between 17 to 22 fatalities and up to 147 injuries. Floyd believed the Creek losses included 37 warriors, among them Chief Highhead Jim. Injured, Floyd retreated to Fort Mitchell, marking this conflict at Calaby Creek as Georgia's final aggressive move in the war. In October, General Thomas Flournoy assembled a group of about 1,000 people, including soldiers from the 3rd United States Infantry, local militiamen, volunteers, and Choctaw Indians at Fort Stoddart. At the same time, General Claiborne received orders to destroy Creek property near the confluence of the Alabama and Tombigbee rivers. Departing from Fort St. Stephen, he managed to destroy some property but did not engage in any significant battles. Meanwhile, Captain Samuel Dale led a team from Fort Madison near Suggsville toward the Alabama River. On November 12th, Dale and a small group attempted to intercept a war canoe and ended up in a dramatic face-to-face battle with 4 warriors while by themselves in the canoe, an encounter famously known as the Canoe Fight. Continuing their operations, Claiborne's forces moved about 85 miles north of Fort Stoddart and established Fort Claiborne. On December 23rd, they engaged with a small force at the Holy Ground, destroying 260 houses. William Weatherford, a notable figure, barely escaped capture. The encounter resulted in 1 death and 6 wounded on the Mississippi side, while 30 Creek soldiers were killed. However, due to shortages in supplies, Claiborne had to retreat to Fort St. Stephen's. Meanwhile, in the Carolinas, Brigadier General Joseph Graham and his brigade, which included Colonel Reuben Nash's South Carolina militia, were dispatched to the Georgia frontier to confront the Red Sticks. At the end of January 1814, Nash's troops departed South Carolina and headed to the federal road starting in Augusta, Georgia. They made their way to Fort Benjamin Hawkins, now near Macon, Georgia, and continued on to support other forts like Fort Mitchell, now near Phoenix City, Alabama, Fort Bainbridge, Fort Hull, and Fort Decatur. By July 1814, companies from Nash's regiment had arrived at Fort Mitchell. Ultimately, Graham's brigade only saw limited action in a few skirmishes before returning home. Jackson aimed to defeat the Creek people but had a larger goal to capture Pensacola from the Spanish. He planned to head south, building roads and destroying the towns of the Creeks before launching an attack from Mobile. However, he faced logistical issues and the challenge of his soldiers' short enlistment periods. During his campaign, the low Tennessee River impeded supply movements, and there wasn't much food for the horses. On October 10th, Jackson set off with 2,500 soldiers. Despite having an injured arm, he established Fort Strother as a supply hub. On November 3rd, his cavalry, led by Brigadier General John Coffee, defeated Red Sticks at the Battle of Tallushatchee, where many of the Red Sticks, including women and children, were killed. Later, Jackson helped 150 Allied Creeks under siege from 700 Red Stick warriors, securing a crucial win at the Battle of Talladega on November 9th. Post-Talladega, Jackson struggled with limited supplies and discipline problems due to the short enlistments of his men. John Alexander Cox's East Tennessee militia joined the fray on October 12th, marching from Knoxville to Chattanooga and then toward Fort Strother. However, militia rivalries and Cox's own delays, including an accidental attack on a friendly village, slowed their progress. By the time Cox's men arrived at Fort Strother on December 12th, their enlistments were almost up, forcing Jackson to dismiss them. Even more, Brigadier General Coffee's cavalry deserted him. By the end of 1813, Jackson was left with just 1 regiment, soon to see their enlistment end. Though Governor William Blount ordered 2,500 new troops, Jackson wouldn't be at full strength until the end of February. When 900 inexperienced recruits arrived on January 14th, Jackson, left with a small core group and Coffee, chose to make the best of the situation. On January 17th, despite significant risks, he led these recruits to join the Georgia militia in a march to the village of Emukfau, resulting in 2 indecisive battles, after which they returned to Fort Strother, halting offensive moves until mid-March. The situation improved with the February 6th arrival of the 39th United States Infantry, offering a disciplined base for Jackson's force, which eventually grew to around 5,000 men. Another draft from Tennessee saw Cox marching with 2,000 men to Fort Strother, who almost mutinied upon learning about the differing enlistment terms. Despite the misunderstanding leading to Cox's temporary arrest, the issue was resolved, and Cox was cleared. With the new reinforcements, Jackson spent time building roads and training his troops. In mid-March, they moved against the Red Sticks at Tohopeka, Horseshoe Bend, first establishing Fort Williams en route. With about 3,000 able soldiers and 600 Cherokee and Lower Creek allies, Jackson launched an attack on March 27th at Horseshoe Bend, decisively defeating the Red Sticks and essentially ending their resistance. On August 9, 1814, Andrew Jackson made leaders of the Creek Nation's upper and lower towns sign the Treaty of Fort Jackson. Although some Creek chiefs who had supported Jackson protested, the Creek Nation ended up giving up about half of what is now Alabama and parts of southern Georgia to the U.S. government, totaling over 21 million acres. This was despite the Creek War being more of a civil conflict within the Creek Nation itself. Jackson did not differentiate between his Creek allies and the opposing Red Sticks. He took land from both groups, claiming it was for U.S. security. This land grab even included nearly 2 million acres that belonged to the Cherokee Nation, who had also sided with the U.S. during the conflict. After dealing with the Red Sticks, Jackson set his sights on the Gulf Coast during the War of 1812. Taking matters into his own hands, he invaded Spanish Florida, kicked a British force out of Pensacola, a key supply point for his enemies, and won the famous Battle of New Orleans on January 8, 1815. From 1816 to 1817, tensions kept building along the U.S.-Spanish-Florida border, leading to conflicts like the battles of Negro Fort, Foultown, and the Scott Massacre. Jackson invaded Spanish Florida again in 1818, targeting Red Stick leaders who had escaped there, in what became known as the First Seminole War. These military victories propelled Jackson to national fame and eventually led to his election as the 7th President of the United States in 1829. During his presidency, Jackson pushed for the Indian Removal Act, which Congress passed in 1830. This law allowed for the negotiation of land exchange treaties, payments, and even the forced removal of southeastern tribes to territories west of the Mississippi River. This tragic event is now known as the Trail of Tears, where many Native Americans were forcibly relocated, marking a dark period in American history. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.